One plant, 5 completely different foods, seeds, leaves, flowers, tubers, and pods. Every single part edible, every single part packed with protein. The seeds alone contain more protein than soy. In 1975, the most prestigious scientific institution in America called it the supermarket on a stalk. They said it could solve world hunger. Then it vanished. What happened to the winged bean? Welcome back to Secrets Beneath Nature. Subscribe and drop a comment telling me if you have ever seen or tasted a winged bean. I read every single comment, and your answers help shape future investigations. Now let me take you to the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Picture steep mountain terraces carved into volcanic soil. Farmers have cultivated these slopes for over 2,000 years, and climbing up their bamboo trellises, you will find a vine with the most unusual pods you have ever seen. 4 frilly wings run along each pod like delicate green ribbons. The flowers are pale blue, almost luminous. The leaves are broad and abundant, and beneath the soil, thick tubers are quietly growing. This is Sophocarpus tetragonalobus, the winged bean. And what makes this plant extraordinary is not just one edible part. It is 5. Let us start with the seeds. Crack open a mature pod and you will find small, round beans, similar in appearance to soybeans. These seeds contain between 29 and 39% protein by dry weight. That puts them in direct competition with soy, which contains 35 to 40%. But here is where it gets interesting. Those seeds also contain 15 to 18% oil. Good quality, edible oil similar to peanut oil, so you have a protein source and an oil source in one crop. Now look at the leaves. Most bean plants give you beans. That is it. But winged bean leaves are consumed throughout Southeast Asia as a leafy vegetable. They contain 10 to 15% protein on a dry weight basis. Compare that to spinach at around 3%. You are looking at a leafy green with nearly 5 times more protein than what most of us consider a nutritious vegetable. The flowers come next. Those delicate blue blooms that attract pollinators are completely edible. Farmers in Myanmar and Thailand toss them into salads and stir-fries. They contain 5 to 7% protein. Even the flowers contribute nutrition. And then there are the immature pods themselves. Before the seeds mature, the entire pod is eaten like a green bean. Every part of it, the wings, the flesh, the developing seeds inside, all edible, all nutritious. But the real surprise is underground. The winged bean produces tubers, thick, starchy roots that look similar to small potatoes. And here is the number that should stop you in your tracks. Those tubers contain 20% protein on a dry weight basis. Potatoes contain about 2%. Cassava contains about 1%. The winged bean tuber has 10 to 20 times more protein than the starchy staples that feed billions of people. When you add all 5 parts together, you have a single plant that provides complete nutrition. It gives protein from multiple sources, carbohydrates from the tubers, oil from the seeds, and vitamins and minerals from the leaves. A farmer growing winged beans is essentially growing an entire food system on one trellis. This is not some new discovery from a Silicon Valley food tech startup. Indigenous farmers in Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Myanmar, and the Philippines have known this for centuries. They just never wrote the research papers. But in 1975, someone finally did. The National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. published a report that would change everything. The title was simple: The Winged Bean, a high-protein crop for the tropics. The conclusion was extraordinary. These scientists, representing the highest levels of American agricultural research, called the winged bean a potential supermarket on a stalk. Picture the context. 1975. The world was still reeling from the oil crisis. Food prices had spiked globally. Malnutrition in tropical developing countries was reaching crisis levels. And here was a plant already growing in village gardens across Southeast Asia that could provide complete nutrition with minimal inputs. The report triggered an explosion of research funding. Universities across the world launched winged bean programs. The 1981 follow-up report documented even more remarkable findings. scientists discovered that winged bean roots form symbiotic relationships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria. These bacteria pull nitrogen directly from the air and convert it into fertilizer in the soil. The winged bean fixes between 300 and 400 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare annually. That is more than most legumes, more than soybeans. This plant does not just feed people, it feeds the soil. A farmer growing winged beans is actually improving their land for the next season. And here is where modern research becomes critical. Climate scientists studying crop resilience have found that winged beans thrive in temperature ranges where soybeans struggle. Soybeans have a narrow, optimal window. Winged beans tolerate the heat and humidity of tropical lowlands, while also growing in highland conditions. As climate change pushes temperatures higher and makes weather more unpredictable, crops like the winged bean become more valuable, not less. The amino acid profile tells another story. When researchers analyzed the protein quality, they found that winged bean seeds are particularly high in lysine. This is the amino acid most commonly lacking in plant-based diets. Combine the seeds with the leaves, and you get a near-complete essential amino acid profile without any animal products. Traditional farmers were not just eating this plant randomly. They were practicing sophisticated nutritional science, combining different parts of the plant to achieve complete nutrition. Modern laboratory analysis validated what indigenous knowledge had preserved for generations. So, the science was solid. The nutrition was exceptional. International researchers were excited. Funding was flowing. The supermarket on a stalk was ready for its global debut. Then it disappeared. What happened between 1985 and today is a story about systems, not conspiracies. It is about how the world decides which crops matter and which crops get forgotten. To understand the winged bean's erasure, you need to understand the Green Revolution. Starting in the 1960s and accelerating through the 1980s, international development agencies transformed global agriculture. The goal was simple: increase yields, feed more people, prevent famine. The method was monoculture. High-yield varieties of wheat, rice, and maize were grown in vast single-crop fields with heavy applications of synthetic fertilizer and pesticides. And it worked. Yields increased dramatically. Famines were averted. But something else happened too. Crop diversity collapsed. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations documented that in some tropical regions, indigenous crop diversity declined by 75% within a generation. Farmers who once grew dozens of different food plants shifted to one or two cash crops. Traditional varieties were abandoned. Local knowledge was lost. The winged bean was one of thousands of casualties. But there is another force we need to examine. The soybean did not become the world's dominant protein crop by accident. It became dominant because entire systems were built around it. Consider what soy has that winged beans lack. Soy pods mature uniformly across the plant, allowing mechanical harvesting with combines. One machine can harvest hundreds of hectares. Winged bean pods mature unevenly over 2 to 3 months. Each pod ripens at a different time. Harvesting requires human hands, returning to the same plant again and again. Soy grows as a bush, standing upright without support. Winged beans are climbing vines that need trellises. Building trellis infrastructure costs money and labor. Soy can be dried and stored for years. The processing infrastructure exists globally, crushing plants, oil extraction facilities, protein isolation equipment, billions of dollars of industrial capacity built specifically for soy. Winged beans have a fresh shelf life of 3 to 5 days without refrigeration. No equivalent processing infrastructure exists, and behind all of this sits government policy. The United States subsidized soy production for decades. Trade agreements promoted soy exports. Research funding flowed to soy improvement. A farmer in Iowa choosing to grow soy was supported by an entire ecosystem of markets, technology, and policy. A farmer in Nigeria choosing to grow winged beans was on their own. This is not a story about a better crop losing to an inferior one. Soy is genuinely useful. The infrastructure works. The system functions. But the story reveals something important about how we choose crops. The best crop does not always win. The most industrial crop wins. After 1985, research funding for winged beans collapsed. The numbers are stark. Over 90% decline in published research. International development agencies moved on to new priorities. The scientists who had championed this plant retired or shifted focus. The winged bean entered what agricultural researchers call orphan crop status. An orphan crop exists in a vicious cycle. Without research funding, no one develops improved varieties. Without improved varieties, the crop stays commercially unviable. Without commercial viability, no funding arrives. The cycle reinforces itself. For 40 years, the supermarket on a stalk has been growing in village gardens across the tropics, essentially unchanged, essentially forgotten. I want you to feel the weight of this. The winged bean is not unique. It is one example of a pattern. Agricultural scientists estimate that over 7,000 plant species have been cultivated for food throughout human history. Today, just 3 crops provide more than 50% of human calories. Those crops are rice, wheat, and maize. 15 crops provide 90%. What happened to the other 6,985? How many supermarkets on a stalk are quietly disappearing right now while we focus on the same handful of commodities? But this story does not end in 1985. In a research station outside Bangkok, Thai scientists are developing new winged bean varieties. These cultivars produce more pods, mature more uniformly, and show better tolerance for disease. In Nigeria, researchers are crossing African winged bean lines with Asian varieties, creating hybrids adapted to West African conditions. In Malaysia, a breeding program has developed varieties specifically for their tubers, recognizing that protein-rich root crops could transform food security. The scientists who work on orphan crops rarely make headlines. They do not receive venture capital funding or Silicon Valley attention, but they are quietly rebuilding the knowledge base that was abandoned 40 years ago. And something else is happening. In farmers' markets across Southeast Asia, winged beans are appearing more frequently, not as a curiosity, but as a valued vegetable. In the Philippines, winged bean leaves are becoming trendy among health-conscious urban consumers. In Myanmar, traditional dishes featuring winged bean flowers are being rediscovered by young chefs. The food sovereignty movement has embraced crops like the winged bean as symbols. Growing indigenous vegetables becomes an act of resistance against monoculture. Saving seeds becomes a political statement. The supermarket on a stalk represents not just nutrition, but autonomy. I want to be honest with you. The winged bean probably will not replace soy. The industrial infrastructure gap is too large. The harvesting challenges are real. The processing technology does not exist at scale. But that is the wrong question. The right question is about diversity. Our food system is dangerously narrow. 3 crops providing half our calories means 3 points of failure. 1 disease, 1 climate shift, 1 pest outbreak could devastate global food security. We need more options, not fewer. The winged bean represents one option, one piece of a more resilient food system, and the same science that validated this plant in 1975 can help bring it back. Investment in processing technology could solve shelf life problems. Breeding programs could address harvesting challenges. Consumer awareness could create markets. We know it works. We have known for 50 years. So let me bring this back to where we started. Papua New Guinea, those highland terraces, a vine climbing a bamboo trellis producing 5 different foods from a single root system, farmers who never needed a laboratory to tell them what they already knew. The winged bean was not erased by conspiracy or malice. It was erased by systems that prioritize efficiency over resilience, monoculture over diversity, industrial scale over nutritional density. It was erased by the quiet pressure of markets and policies that value some crops and ignore others. But the plant is still here. In village gardens from Myanmar to Nigeria, in research stations where dedicated scientists refuse to give up, in the genetic diversity that survives despite our neglect, the supermarket on a stalk is still growing. The question is not whether the plant will survive. It has survived for thousands of years without our help. The question is whether we will remember to look, whether we will invest in the research, build the infrastructure, and create the markets. And maybe the bigger question is this: what else are we losing right now? What other crops, what other knowledge, what other possibilities are being quietly erased while we are not paying attention? That is what we explore here on Secrets Beneath Nature, the forgotten science, the buried knowledge, the stories that mainstream agriculture left behind. If this investigation opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want to keep digging into these hidden histories, and leave a comment telling me what forgotten crop we should investigate next. The winged bean was erased once. Let us make sure it does not happen again.